This week's video is looking at Luminar Neo, the early access edition, and we are going to be taking a raw image through to an artistic license of a final image. Everyone has a different end result that they are after with their images, and perhaps people will use, like myself, I will use Lightroom, Photoshop, and I use Luminar as a plug-in. Certain aspects in Luminar I find that are really well and quickly done. You may be, on the other hand, an editor that just likes one software and you want to work your way through that, and Luminar Neo could be that software for you. There is plenty of software out there, and it is a good thing when they allow you to trial software because you can see what one's going to work best for your final images. As I mentioned, my workflow: Lightroom, Photoshop, Luminar. Back into Lightroom for the final tweaks. But it depends on the image itself. And as I say, it depends on what you are seeking for your final image. In this video, it is a raw edit right through to the final, as I said, artistic license of the final image. And hopefully it just lets you see what can be done. You'll probably be able to do it a lot better than I have with this image, but it just lets you see what can be done. So let's dive into this image, which we will say is raw to artistic license of the final image. So this is the image we are starting with, and I'm going to allow myself some creative and artistic freedom with this image, but I just wanted to see how Luminar Neo works with a raw image. So I'm going to take you through the entire edit. Now, I reckon the edit for this, I guess, is going to take around 20 minutes, but what I'm going to do, if it does, is in post, what I'll do is I'll speed up the areas that to save you sitting watching me editing. But before I do it, I'll explain what I am doing. So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to go into AI Enhance. And I know that that's the raw develop there, but I want to push a couple of things in here. This is just my preferred starting method. In there, quite happy. And I'm going to push the sky further because I have got stuff going on in the sky over in this area, more so than this area. But let's see what it does. I'm then going to get into the structure as well. We've got lovely rocks here and we've got lovely detail in the rocks. The image overall is not the best image. That's why I am editing it. But you can see already just with the Enhance AI and the structure, the difference that has made. From here, I am going to get into develop. Now, I had the chance there, the option there of working with the raw develop. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring back some of the highlights. And again, I like that. And you may notice if you do this, that at first that did say develop and it was raw. But because I jumped into the structure AI and the enhance AI, it no longer says raw develop. The reason I did that as well is because I want to change the water. Had I jumped straight into raw, I wouldn't be able to change what I'm going to do with the water. So it's just learning your way around to get the final idea of what you are after. I'm going to raise the shadows here. Can hear my dog dreaming in the background. And I am now going to change the temperature. Now this is where I am only aiming at the water. So I'm taking that down to about there, knowing that in the future I'm going to go in and increase the colour and the vibrance in this. So what I'm going to do is push the vibrance there again, just so that I've got the water like this. Now what I've done, because I've done this, I now have a mask available. And with that mask, I'm only going to paint in the highlights, or what I've done to the highlights and the shadows and the temperatures here into those areas. So if I take the brush, make sure it's there. Strength, I'll just keep it at 100% for this. So I'm just going to paint in here. And I'm going to be quite liberal with this because it's a video you're watching and I don't want to take up too much of your valuable time. So I'm just going to paint in there. I will go in and address some of the overpainted areas in the rocks, but for that I'll just speed the video up. And when I come in to do that, I'll just paint over this one just to show you. When I actually come in to do that, I will be doing it with the erase tool, which is here. So you can see already the water has changed. So now I'm going to jump back into the eraser tool and get rid of the areas that I don't want. So if I go in here and start painting. And that's how I'll address any areas that I want to go in to work on or erase. I'll just speed them up so that you're not sitting through that. So again, I can close the develop down. Everything's going on there that I want it to be. Get into details now. Now I'm going to push the small details just to emphasise there is a lot of texture in this, and that's actually pushed it too far, so I'm going to bring that back just to around about there. Right, I'm not bothered about small details in the sky. So what I can do is I can do a massive sweep of where I want the small detail. So I'm going to take the brush up quite big here, and I'm just going to paint in there. And it's everything in the foreground, including the water, because we've got nice things happening in the water here. And I'll just take that down there. If it bleeds onto the sky slightly, I'll be honest, for the purposes of this video, I'm not too bothered at all. So there we go. That's that done as well. Okay, next thing that I'm going to consider is the tonality in the mountains themselves. But to balance that out, I need to go into the sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the develop module, and I'm going to bring the exposure down slightly to get the sky to where I want it. Now you can see that that's quite a massive difference from where it just was. So I'm now going to apply that edit there via the mask to the sky. And now I should have, when I release the mouse, a slightly darker sky. Now you'll notice, I'll keep the mouse on just now, I'll keep the brush on just now. You'll notice that it's bled onto some of the mountain up here. Now I'm not going to remove it from that because it may cause a slight haloing around it, and I may in fact have to go in and paint some of it back on. You want a natural transition between them. And if I go in and pull the exposure down further, we will see even more. And as you notice, I missed that area there, so I'm going to paint it back in there. And I'm going to let it bleed onto the mountain slightly. Not too much, but just enough so that we don't have haloing around them. Plus, going into that distance, I will actually get away with it, if you want to use that turn of phrase. And I'm going to push the smart contrast there. So what we've started with is that, and already we have that, and it looks a stronger image, and we've got more detail in it. So I'm going to close develop down. Now, as you know, each time you close this, you can see up here we have 6 edits. And I can go back in and jump into edits and edit that and change any aspects of that, or I can delete them and start again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with each one of these modules within this and each one of the tabs to get the image that I'm after. Now I'm still working at the moment, I'm looking overall, but I'm picking out different elements within it, knowing what I want to do next. And the next thing that I actually want to do is lift the shadows over here and in here, but not too much. So I'm going to jump back into the develop module, and I'm going to push the shadows just to see what happens. Happier with that, but I only want it in certain areas. So I'm going to get into the mask, paint mask. This time though, I'm going to take the strength down. I'm going to leave the softness there, but I'm going to take the strength down. I'm guessing at 73. I want to just lift the shadows here. This is a bad image, this is a bad photograph from the point of view I never took in the entire dynamic range when I shot it. It was 3 or 4 different images, and I never got exactly what I wanted from it. So that's why I'm using this one, just to see if it can be recovered to a reasonable standard. So let's go back in here and lift the shadows again now that I've painted them in. I don't want to go too far with them. Yep, quite happy. Let's just take that. And again, quite happy with that. I've already painted in there. Now, I'm not too bothered about them, but I'll bring them out. And I'm not painting in here. I like that separation. Perhaps up here slightly. and we'll go in. Yep, that's actually lifted that better than I thought it would. And I'm going to lift some down here. Again, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do with the image overall. So I'm going to paint in there and in there. Leave it at that just now, so I'm going to close that down. Next thing, I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust the colour of the water. I've seen the water a couple of different colours, and the one that I'm going to go for with this, I haven't seen too often at all, but I have seen it. And I'll flash an image up on screen just now, which was taken with the Samsung S21. And you can see the vibrancy. Samsung have got their own colour gamut, but you can see the vibrancy in the water. So I'm going to try and emulate that, but hopefully a little bit more natural. So I'm going to get into colour now. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go into the hue shift on this. And I'm only looking at the water. Now, it's not going to be too believable, but I'm just tweaking it slightly just to get to a point where I'm quite happy. I'm also aware of the highlights within this, and I'm having to watch them slightly because of that. So if I pull that back there, more believable, if you want to use that word. And just to show you, before, after, now. That is too vibrant for me. But I'm going to paint it into that area at the moment. So we can go into the saturation or the luminance now. And I can pull back, I can push the cyans, which is way too much. I can bring the blues back, which is dulling it back down a little bit again. Or I can go in for a hue shift again. So we're looking around the entire image now just to see what it's doing, but with a main focus on the water. There's plenty that I can do here. I can bring back the saturation of this. If I pull the cyan back, and I know I will go in and edit this at the very end because I need to balance out the image as best I can. If you look at that there, look what's happening to the highlights in the water. They are just becoming totally and utterly unbelievable. So let's just, I'm going to leave it at that just now because I know I can balance out the image around there. Again, take the mask, and I'm only going to apply this to the water. So that's me, I've applied that to there, and if I show you the before and after, you'll notice that it's a massive difference in the water. But this image hasn't worked anyway, so that's why I can do all this. I can just play around and it will get me familiar with the software as well. So I'm going to close that. Now knowing that I've closed that, I can go in and address any colours within the actual landscape itself. I'm actually going to just pull back the vibrance overall and then paint it in to the mountains themselves. So here's the before, after, before, after. Now they stand out more, but they stand out more because we've edited the sky as well. I'm going to close that down, and we have everything here that I really need for this. So now that I'm at this point, it's now I decide what do I want to do with the rocks. Do I want to change the colour of them? Do I want to go in and balance out the colours? And for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into colour. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and play around with these rocks here, and you can see that that one there with the water going over it is quite orange. So I'm actually going to increase the saturation of these slightly, and it is just slightly. I like the subtle edits, and I want them to stand out from the background mountains, but I don't want them to stand out too much. Just to around about there. And again, I'm only applying them in certain areas, so I'm going to push the vibrance slightly. And for a change, I'm going to actually push the saturation. Now, the water, everything's changed with that, and it actually looks okay there, but I only want to apply it to certain areas. So again, looking at masking. So if I go before, after, you can see quite a difference here already. Looking at the image overall, do I want to increase anything else? Perhaps I want to increase the water again, so I'm just going to close the colour down and reopen it, and as you notice it resets. So I'm going to get in and I'm going to increase this yet again. Here we are nearly done with this image. A couple more tweaks just to do, and then that is it. Complete for this edit, and hopefully so far you're seeing just how you can change subtle elements within it. I'm going to jump back into the develop module, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the exposure down slightly, as much as that, and that's -30. I only want that in the sky though. So again, use the masking brush, paint in. If it bleeds onto the mountains, that is okay, because the mountains are in the distance and we are looking for subtlety in this from the point of view that we do not want hard edges around it. And this image is just complete and utter creative freedom. You know what the starting image was like, so that's all this is. It's just trying to bring out certain elements in it. That's done as well. The next thing, I am going to jump in and I'm going to look at the light in certain areas. I want to bring out extra highlights in this, but I want them to be subtle. So for me, back into develop, highlights, and I'm going to push these quite a bit. And the areas that I am watching are around here and around these areas here. I just want to bring out some more detail in the rocks. Some in the mountains in the background, but I'll show you that when I come to that, because that'll be another edit. So here we are. The strength of this is going to be nearly 100%. And I'm going to take, at the foreground here, I'm going to use quite a big brush because I want to pick out larger areas and I don't want it to look as if it's painted. As we move further into the distance, I'm only going to pick out small areas up here. But you'll see that again on the next pass of the develop edit. This side of the image at all for me creates no interest. So I could see this as an 8x10 or a square format image. So let's go in and look at both. So there's the original. And we've got the horizontal alignment, everything's there, rotate and flip. So let's go in and see what it's like at 1:1. Now, if you look at that there, if we move that across and we put that dead center, we have everything leading into the image. We know that there's a flow of water here and we know that that flows out. So if I just click crop on this, that's the image. And it looks okay. And it draws you straight into where I want you to be, which is within the water. And we have a lead down here, but we've got half a tree. So if I get back into crop, 5:4, there. Now for me, that provides a better focus with your image, and I'm also now able to bring in some of these trees here without cropping that out. We have a lead in from here. We still have the water coming in, but we no longer have this area around here. So that for me is a better crop for this image. That I quite like. And what I'm going to do is I am going to bring the sky down slightly, and then I'm going to call this image done. Hopefully you get something from that, and hopefully it lets you see how, in this case it was a Nikon D850 image, and it was from the raw file through to the artistic license of that image. I know I changed quite a bit, but it lets you see how quick the software is now, and that is a massive improvement from Luminar 4, Luminar AI, and now into Luminar Neo. And as you know, this still is the early access edition, so I don't know if the speed will improve any with the full edition once it comes out later this month, but I'm quite happy with the speed. I'm quite happy with everything it did. As I mentioned at the end of the last video, we are currently in Ullapool at the moment on a 4-day photographic trip, so hopefully next week's video will be from Ullapool, or perhaps not next week, maybe a couple of weeks down the line, just to give me time to edit anything that we may get together so that it's enjoyable for you to watch. Thanks again for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.